At 10:12 on June 19, 1944, the air above the Philippine Sea is loud with radio chatter and engine noise. The U.S. Carrier Task Force, hundreds of miles west of Saipan, has already launched combat air patrols. Now the radar plots harden into certainty. A large Japanese strike is inbound. Lieutenant Junior Grade Alexander Vrakuis, 24 years old, sits strapped into the cockpit of a Grumman F6F Hellcat at roughly 15,000 feet, wings level, scanning the sky ahead. He belongs to Fighter Squadron 16, flying from the deck of USS Lexington, CV-16. His mission is simple on paper: intercept, disrupt, and kill the attackers before they reach the ships. At 10:16, he spots them, dark specks growing fast, a formation of Japanese Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bombers with escorts above and behind. The bombers are not coming in low. They are climbing to attack altitude, building speed, and they are close enough now that mistakes will be fatal. Vrakuis pushes the nose down and advances the throttle. The Hellcat responds with raw force, a 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 double wasp radial engine pulling a heavy airframe into a controlled dive. The F6F is not a knife fighter like the Japanese Zero. It is a carrier-built brawler, fast in the dive, stable as a gun platform, and designed to take hits and keep flying. In its wings sit 6 Browning M2 .50 caliber machine guns, belt-fed, with enough ammunition to sustain a long engagement if the pilot fires in disciplined bursts. At 10:19, Vrakuis lines up his first pass. He does not turn with the escorts. He does not chase. He closes straight through the bomber stream, picks a target, and squeezes the trigger. The Hellcat shudders as the guns hammer. Tracers streak forward. The first Judy catches fire and breaks away. He climbs back into position, using speed as armor. The Hellcat's advantage is not elegance, it is energy. Dive, fire, extend, climb, reset, fire again. At 10:21, he makes a second pass. Another bomber falls. At 10:22, another. His bursts are short, timed, and close. He is not wasting rounds. He is not giving the enemy time to recover. Below him, the carriers keep steaming into the wind, launching more fighters, recovering others, cycling aircraft like a factory line at sea. That system matters as much as the airplane. Radar pickets, radio discipline, deck crews, spare parts, and trained pilots, all of it is aimed at one outcome: deny the Japanese strike the chance to land a clean hit. At 10:23, Vrakuis rolls into yet another attack run, and the sky in front of him fills with targets. At 10:23, Vrakuis is already committed. He drops the left wing and slides into position behind a Judy that is trying to hold formation. The bomber's speed is high, but its options are limited. Keep climbing and die, or break and lose the attack run. At 10:24, he closes to within a few hundred yards. The Hellcat's nose barely wobbles. This is what the aircraft was built to do: stay stable under recoil, stay controllable at speed, and let the pilot place fire exactly where it matters. Vrakuis fires a 2-second burst. The .5 caliber rounds walk across the bomber's wing root and fuselage. The Judy pitches, then drops away trailing smoke. At 10:25, he levels out and immediately picks another. The sky is crowded now. Escorts are above, but the bomber stream is the real threat. The carriers are the target. Every second matters. He takes the next pass with minimal turn radius, using the Hellcat's weight and power to keep speed through the maneuver. He fires. Another Judy rolls inverted and falls. By 10:26, Vrakuis' count is climbing, but he is not celebrating. He is managing fuel, managing altitude, and managing angles. The Hellcat is heavy, over 10,000 pounds loaded, and that mass is a weapon if used correctly. It carries armor around the cockpit and self-sealing fuel tanks designed to reduce fire risk when hit. Against Japanese fighters and bombers that often prioritize maneuverability over protection, the Hellcat can survive damage that would destroy lighter aircraft. At 10:27, Versiu spots a Judy below and ahead, trying to push through the defensive screen. He dives again. The dive is steep, controlled, and fast, exactly the regime where the Hellcat outclasses the Zero's ability to follow without bleeding energy. He fires at close range. The bomber shatters into fragments. At 10:29, another target, then another. The engagement compresses into a brutal rhythm. Acquire, close, fire, break off, climb back into position. The air is full of vapor trails, tracers, and scattered debris. The Japanese formation is no longer a formation. It is a loose cluster of aircraft trying to survive and still reach the fleet. On the carrier decks below, the system keeps working. Combat information centers plot tracks by radar. Fighter direction officers vector Hellcats into the intercept lanes. Pilots are guided by headings and altitudes, not guesswork. It is not just a duel of airplanes, it is industrial warfare in the air, organized, repeated, and scalable. At 10:31, Versiu sees escorts angling down toward him. He does not accept a turning fight. He pushes the throttle, extends, and climbs. That choice is doctrine, learned and drilled. The Hellcat can win by refusing the enemy's strengths. It can dive away, convert speed to separation, then climb back into the fight with altitude as insurance. At 10:33, he rolls again to re-enter the bomber stream, because the bombers are still there and the ships are still below. At 10:33, Versiu re-enters the traffic pattern of war. High-speed slashing attacks, then separation, then a climb back to altitude. The Japanese escorts finally commit, diving to defend what is left of the strike. The airspace tightens. Fighters cross at closing speeds that leave no room for hesitation. At 10:35, he snaps the Hellcat into a shallow turn and watches a Zero flash past, too fast to follow without giving up the bomber line. He ignores it. The decision is not heroic, it is practical. Protect the fleet first. Kill the bombers first. At 10:37, he drops onto another Judy. The bomber's rear gunner swings the mount, firing short, desperate bursts. The tracers are low and wide. Versiu keeps closing. He fires one controlled burst from 6 Browning M2.5 calibers, and the bomber's tail section erupts. The aircraft folds and disappears into cloud. At 10:39, his ammunition counter is becoming a factor. A Hellcat can carry roughly 400 rounds per gun in common loadouts, but sustained combat burns it fast if a pilot gets greedy. He does not get greedy. He fires only when the sight picture is perfect. He aims for engines, wing roots, cockpit lines. The Hellcat's stable platform makes those choices possible at speed. At 10:41, he sees another bomber trying to limp away, already damaged. He closes anyway. The fleet cannot afford maybe. He fires. The bomber catches fire and falls. By 10:45, the first wave is collapsing. Fighters and bombers scatter, break altitude, and run. Below, the carriers remain intact. Above, the air is littered with parachutes and wreckage. Then, the wider picture hits. The Battle of the Philippine Sea is not decided by one pilot or one pass. It is decided by a system and by an aircraft designed to fit that system. The Hellcat is not just a fighter, it is a carrier fighter built for long patrols, brutal recoveries, and repeated sorties. It can take punishment. It can be repaired quickly on a crowded deck. Its engine is reliable. Its landing gear is wide and strong. Its cockpit visibility is good enough for carrier approaches in hard conditions. All of that turns into combat power over days, not minutes. At 11:10, new vectors come in. More contacts, more intercepts. The pattern repeats as additional Japanese strikes push toward the fleet. Many never get close. U.S. radar sees them early. U.S. fighter direction puts Hellcats where they need to be. And the Hellcat's performance envelope, speed, dive, firepower, survivability, lets American pilots dictate the terms. The Japanese arrive with aircraft that can still maneuver sharply, but too many of their pilots now lack the flight hours their predecessors had in 1941 and 1942. They are outnumbered. They are intercepted earlier. They face pilots trained to fight the Zero without respecting it. By early afternoon, the slaughter earns its nickname, the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The Hellcat does not win it alone, but it becomes the weapon most associated with the outcome because it is everywhere the fight is decided. By 1520, on June 19, 1944, the air over Task Force 58 is quieter, but the radio is still busy. Pilots report low fuel, low ammunition, and scattered enemy contacts retreating to the west. Deck crews on the carriers are already resetting the machinery of air power, refueling, rearming, patching holes, swapping damaged prop blades, changing spark plugs, loading belts of .50 caliber ammunition into wings still warm from firing. At 16:05, Vracheu lands back on Lexington. The approach is steady, but the fatigue is visible in his hands and shoulders. Carrier landings are not a formality. A fully loaded Hellcat comes back heavy and fast, and the margin between a clean trap and a crash is measured in feet. The airplane's wide landing gear and rugged structure absorb punishment that would cripple lighter fighters. It is an engineering decision that saves pilots when their reflexes are worn down. That night, the battle continues in planning rooms and hangar bays. At 21:40, intelligence officers compare pilot reports with radar tracks. The pattern is consistent. Japanese strikes are detected early, broken up at range, and finished in the final miles by fighters that can outclimb damaged bombers and outdive escorts that try to drag them into turning contests. The Hellcat fits that plan like a tool built for a single job. The aircraft had been born from hard lessons. In 1942, early fights against the A6M Zero exposed a brutal truth. American carrier fighters needed more power, more armor, and more firepower, without losing carrier practicality. The Hellcat arrives in quantity in 1943 with exactly that balance. The R2800 engine gives it speed and climb. The airframe carries protection the Zero generally lacks: armor plate, robust structure, self-sealing tanks. The 6 M2 Brownings give it reach and lethality without relying on fragile cannon mechanisms. It is not meant to win by turning tighter. It is meant to win by dictating the engagement, surviving hits, and returning to fight again. By mid-1944, that philosophy is embedded in training. U.S. pilots are taught to refuse the Zero's favorite fight. They use altitude. They use speed. They attack in pairs. They extend and reset. The Hellcat makes those tactics executable for average pilots, not just aces. That is the real nightmare for Japan, a weapon system that scales. Vracheu's own career follows the arc of the war. After the Philippine Sea, his score and reputation make him valuable not only as a fighter pilot, but as an instructor and leader, someone who can translate combat into doctrine. In briefings, he talks less about heroism and more about angles, closure rates, and trigger discipline. He describes what happens when a pilot chases an escort and loses the bomber stream. He describes what happens when a pilot fires too early and runs dry at the worst moment. When the war ends, the Hellcat's legacy is already locked in. It is remembered not as the most elegant fighter, but the one that arrived at the right time with the right strengths and with a logistics and training system behind it that made those strengths decisive. Museums preserve the airframes. Historians track the battle reports. And on every carrier deck that follows, the lesson remains. Air superiority is not a single duel in the sky. It is a repeatable process. Radar, direction, maintenance, pilot training, and a machine built to survive the work.